A man stands in a Cincinnati apothecary in the late 19th century. His name is John Uri Lloyd. He is a chemist, a pharmacist, but more than that, he is a master of a lost art. Around him are hundreds of glass jars containing roots, barks, and leaves. He consults a large, leather-bound book, its pages filled with complex formulas. This book, The King's American Dispensatory, is a pharmacopoeia of botanical medicine, refined over decades by a school of doctors known as the Eclectics. They believed that the fields and forests of North America were a living pharmacy. Lloyd doesn't know it yet, but he is one of the last of his kind. Within a few short years, the world he commands will be systematically dismantled. The schools that teach this knowledge will be closed. The doctors who practice it will be delegitimized. And the book in his hands, this vast library of botanical cures, will be erased from the new, official story of American medicine. Everything you know about the professionalization of medicine is not wrong. It's incomplete. The function you were taught was to raise standards and protect patients. The function that the original reformers documented in their own records was also to create a monopoly by eliminating all competition. And that function was devastatingly successful, which is exactly why the recipe books had to disappear. To understand how this happened, you have to understand the world the reformers were trying to fix. Turn-of-the-century America was a medical free-for-all. Alongside legitimate doctors, a thriving market of patent medicines promised to cure everything from consumption to baldness. Dangerous narcotics were common ingredients. Cocaine toothache drops were sold for children. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, advertised to calm fussy bobbies, was laced with morphine. These products existed in a wild, unregulated landscape. There was no FDA as you know it, no requirement to prove safety or efficacy. The need for reform was not a fiction. It was a genuine public health crisis. This chaos provided the perfect justification for an organization with a long-held ambition, the American Medical Association. Founded in Philadelphia in 1847, the AMA's goal was to standardize American medicine under a single philosophy. Their competition was not just the snake oil salesmen. It was other, established schools of medical thought. Chief among them were the eclectics. Eclectic medicine was not folk healing. It was a professionalized system with its own medical schools, hospitals, and scientific journals. Its practitioners rejected the heroic medicine of the day, things like bloodletting and dousing patients with mercury. Instead, they focused on non-invasive therapies, and most importantly, on a sophisticated pharmacopoeia derived from Native American and European botanical knowledge. Their master text was King's American Dispensatory, later revised and expanded by John Uri Lloyd himself. It was a rigorous, evidence-based manual. It detailed the chemical properties of plants, the methods for extracting their active compounds, and the specific dosages for treating specific conditions. It was the intellectual heart of a system that directly competed with the AMA's vision for medicine. For the eclectics, nature was the primary source of medicine. For the emerging AMA standard, the future was the laboratory and synthetic chemistry. Only one system could prevail. The battle for control began long before the final blow. In 1904, the AMA formed the Council on Medical Education. Its purpose was to inspect and grade the nation's medical schools. This was the first step in creating a centralized authority that could decide which schools and which medical philosophies were legitimate. But the AMA's own internal evaluations could be dismissed as self-serving. They needed an outside force, a weapon that carried the weight of objectivity and scientific progress. They found it in a man named Abraham Flexner. Abraham Flexner was not a doctor. He was an educator commissioned by the prestigious Carnegie Foundation for the advancement of teaching. His non-medical background was his greatest asset. It gave his work a veneer of impartiality. In 1910, Flexner published his findings in a book-length study, Medical Education in the United States and Canada. It would become known as the Flexner Report. He traveled the country, visiting all 155 medical schools. He compared the university-based, science-driven schools, often modeled on the German system, with the many smaller, independent and for-profit schools. His report was a bombshell. The brief provides the specific suggested quotes, "a disgrace" and "utterly wretched." The quote, "a plague spot," is not in the brief. An invention of quotes is specifically cautioned against. Simply remove the third quote. He wasn't entirely wrong. Many of the institutions he criticized were little more than diploma mills, but his recommendations were not about reform. They were about erasure. The Flexner Report proposed a drastic reduction in the number of medical schools, from 155 down to just 31. It specifically targeted for closure any school not affiliated with a university and not heavily invested in laboratory science and research. This definition perfectly described nearly every sectarian institution, including the eclectic medical colleges. The report itself had no legal power. It could not ban a single book or close a single school, but its recommendations became the blueprint for those who could. State licensing boards began refusing to recognize graduates from schools that Flexner had condemned. The great philanthropic foundations, including Carnegie and Rockefeller, announced they would only fund schools that met the new, Flexner-approved standard. The effect was swift and brutal. Within 2 decades, the number of medical schools in the United States plummeted. In 1906, there were 160. By 1930, only 76 remained. The casualties were not random. The Flexner model of medical education, with its university affiliation, extensive labs, and full-time research faculty, was incredibly expensive. This disproportionately impacted the schools that served marginalized communities. Of the 7 medical schools for African Americans that existed before the report, 5 were forced to close. Only Howard and Meharry universities survived. The majority of schools that freely admitted women also disappeared. The path to becoming a doctor narrowed dramatically, excluding women and minorities for generations. And the eclectic medical colleges, with their focus on botanical medicine, were wiped out completely. John Uri Lloyd saw what was happening. His world was vanishing. The schools were closing. The professors were retiring. The graduates could no longer get licensed. A whole body of empirical knowledge gathered over a century was being actively erased, dismissed as unscientific quackery. He made a decision. If he couldn't save the institutions, he would save the knowledge. He and his brothers began using their own funds to build an ark, not of wood, but of brick and paper. They founded the Lloyd Library and Museum in Cincinnati. Its mission was to acquire and preserve the entire literary history of the eclectic movement and the botanical sciences it was built on. Lloyd gathered the books, the journals, the dissertations, and the pharmacopoeias. He saved the King's American Dispensatory. He saved the recipe books. They are not lost, they are not banned. They are sitting on a shelf in a library in Ohio. The knowledge wasn't destroyed, it was archived. It was put away, waiting. And today, modern science is, in a way, catching up to John Uri Lloyd. Many of our most important drugs, from aspirin derived from willow bark to the cancer treatment Taxol from the Pacific yew tree, are plant-derived. Pharmaceutical companies now send researchers into rainforests, seeking the very kind of knowledge the eclectics spent a century compiling. The Flexner Report created the modern medical profession. It gave us rigorous standards, scientific training, and a higher quality of care. That part of the story is true, but it's not the whole story. In the name of a single monolithic standard, it also dismantled a legitimate rival, narrowed access to the profession, and dismissed a vast library of botanical knowledge. The remedies themselves were never made illegal. The system that produced, tested, and taught them was simply starved out of existence. The question isn't whether the lost cures were real. The question is, what else is waiting inside those books, hiding in plain sight?